Sarah Martinez stood in the sterile conference room at Fort Henderson, her hands trembling slightly as she faced Colonel James Morrison across the polished mahogany table. The fluorescent lights cast harsh shadows on her weathered face, highlighting the exhaustion that had become her constant companion over the past 3 months. She had traveled over 2,000 miles to reach this moment, carrying with her a story that seemed impossible even to herself. The colonel sat rigidly in his pressed uniform, his medals catching the light as he leaned back in his leather chair. His steel gray eyes studied Sarah with the kind of skepticism that came from 30 years of military service. He had heard countless stories from civilians claiming extraordinary experiences, and most of them were either seeking attention or suffering from trauma-induced delusions. At 55, Morrison had developed an almost supernatural ability to separate truth from fiction, and everything about Sarah's demeanor suggested she belonged in the latter category. Sarah's voice cracked as she began her account. She spoke of lights in the sky above her small town of Millbrook, Arizona, lights that moved with purpose and intelligence. She described sounds that penetrated walls and seemed to vibrate through her very bones. Her words painted a picture of events that defied conventional explanation, of phenomena that challenged everything the colonel thought he knew about the world. The military base had received Sarah's initial report 3 weeks ago through official channels. Her persistence had been remarkable, submitting form after form, making phone call after phone call, until someone finally agreed to grant her this meeting. She had driven across 3 states in her aging Honda Civic, spending her life savings on motels and gas, all for this chance to tell her story to someone who might have the authority to investigate. Colonel Morrison's expression remained unchanged as Sarah detailed her experiences. He had mastered the art of the poker face, a skill that served him well when dealing with both enemy interrogations and civilian testimonies. His fingers drummed silently on the table as he listened, his mind already formulating the polite but firm rejection he would deliver once she finished speaking. The military had protocols for handling such reports, and most ended with a referral to mental health services. Sarah could sense the colonel's disbelief radiating across the table like heat from a furnace. She had expected this reaction, had prepared herself for it during the long drive to the base. Everyone who had heard her story so far had responded the same way. Her own family had grown distant, her friends had stopped returning her calls, and her employer had suggested she take extended leave for her own well-being. The isolation had been almost as difficult to bear as the memories themselves. The conference room felt smaller with each passing minute. Sarah's palms grew damp as she watched the colonel's eyes grow more distant, his attention clearly wandering to other matters. She knew she was losing him, could feel the moment slipping away like water through her fingers. This meeting represented her last hope of being taken seriously, of finding someone with the resources and authority to investigate what had happened in Millbrook. Colonel Morrison glanced at his watch, a subtle gesture that spoke volumes about his level of engagement. Sarah caught the movement and felt her heart sink. She had seen that same dismissive gesture from the local sheriff, from the FBI agent who had briefly investigated her claims, from the newspaper reporter who had initially shown interest in her story. They all shared the same expression when they decided she was wasting their time. The weight of 3 months of disbelief pressed down on Sarah's shoulders. She thought about the sleepless nights, the recurring nightmares, the way her hands shook whenever she heard aircraft overhead. She remembered the fear in her neighbor's eyes, the way Mrs. Chen had grabbed her children and rushed them inside when Sarah tried to share what she had witnessed. The memory of that rejection still stung. Sarah's voice grew stronger as desperation fueled her words. She described details that she hoped might catch the colonel's attention, technical specifications that seemed beyond her knowledge as a small-town librarian. She spoke of electromagnetic disturbances that had affected every electronic device in a 3-mile radius, of patterns in the lights that suggested advanced navigation systems, of sounds that registered on frequencies that shouldn't have been audible to human ears. Colonel Morrison's training had taught him to look for inconsistencies in testimonies, for the telltale signs that separated genuine experiences from fabricated ones. Sarah's story was remarkably consistent, her details never wavering despite his occasional attempts to trap her in contradictions. Still, consistency alone didn't prove veracity, and extraordinary claims required extraordinary evidence. The clock on the wall ticked toward the end of their scheduled meeting time. Sarah could feel her opportunity slipping away, could see in the colonel's posture that he had already mentally moved on to his next appointment. She had come so far, sacrificed so much, only to face the same wall of skepticism that had greeted her everywhere else. The injustice of it burned in her chest like acid. As Colonel Morrison prepared to deliver his standard response about proper channels and psychological evaluations, Sarah made a decision that would change everything. Her trembling hands moved toward the sleeves of her cardigan, her fingers working at the buttons with determined precision. The time for words had passed, and only proof would serve her now. Sarah's fingers worked methodically at her cardigan sleeves, her movements deliberate despite the tremor in her hands. Colonel Morrison watched with growing impatience, already composing his dismissal speech in his mind. He had allocated exactly 30 minutes for this meeting, and they were approaching the end of that window. His next appointment was with the Pentagon regarding supply chain logistics, a meeting that actually mattered for national security. The cardigan fell away from Sarah's arms, revealing long sleeves underneath. She began rolling up her left sleeve first, the cotton fabric sliding slowly up her forearm. The fluorescent light seemed to intensify as more of her skin became visible, as if the room itself was holding its breath. Colonel Morrison's attention was caught despite himself, his professional training demanding he observe every detail of civilian behavior. As the sleeve reached Sarah's elbow, the first markings became visible. Colonel Morrison's expression shifted from boredom to curiosity, then rapidly to something approaching alarm. What he saw defied immediate explanation. Sarah's skin bore intricate patterns that seemed to have been burned or branded into her flesh, but with a precision that suggested technology far beyond anything he recognized. The markings weren't random scars or tattoos. They formed complex geometric patterns that spiraled around her forearm like a living blueprint. The lines were perfectly straight where they needed to be, curved with mathematical precision where the design demanded it. Each mark was exactly the same width, the same depth, creating a consistency that no human hand could achieve. The scarring had healed completely, suggesting the markings were months old, yet they retained a strange luminescence that seemed to pulse with their own internal light. Colonel Morrison leaned forward involuntarily, his skepticism cracking like ice under pressure. He had seen battlefield injuries, experimental weapons testing, and classified technology demonstrations, but nothing had prepared him for this. The patterns on Sarah's arm resembled circuit boards or navigational charts, containing symbols that looked almost familiar yet completely foreign at the same time. Sarah began rolling up her right sleeve, revealing mirror patterns that completed some kind of symmetrical design. The markings on both arms seemed to complement each other, as if they were two halves of a larger whole. Where the patterns met at her wrists, they formed intricate connecting designs that suggested functionality rather than decoration. These weren't the crude scars of self-harm or the artistic expression of body modification. They were something else entirely. The colonel's military training kicked in as he studied the markings with the analytical mind that had served him throughout his career. The precision suggested laser technology, but no laser he knew could create such intricate patterns without destroying the surrounding tissue. The depth and consistency indicated a controlled process, something that had been done with surgical precision over an extended period. Yet Sarah claimed these markings had appeared in a single night. Sarah's voice was barely above a whisper as she spoke. She explained that she had awakened 3 months ago to find these markings on her arms, with no memory of how they had appeared. The night before, she had gone to bed as a normal librarian in a quiet Arizona town. She had awakened as someone carrying physical evidence of an encounter that challenged everything humanity thought it knew about its place in the universe. The room fell silent except for the hum of the air conditioning system. Colonel Morrison found himself speechless for the first time in recent memory. His mind raced through possible explanations, each one more improbable than the last. Could this be an elaborate hoax? The markings were too complex, too precise to be self-inflicted. Could it be the result of some secret government experiment? He would have known about any project capable of this level of technological sophistication. Sarah watched the colonel's face as understanding began to dawn. She had seen this expression before, in her bathroom mirror the morning she discovered the markings. It was the look of someone whose worldview was crumbling, whose fundamental assumptions about reality were being challenged by undeniable evidence. She remembered her own hysteria that morning, the way she had scrubbed at the markings until her skin was raw, desperate to make them disappear. The markings seemed to shift subtly in the artificial light, creating an optical illusion that made them appear almost animated. Colonel Morrison blinked hard, wondering if his eyes were playing tricks on him. But the patterns remained as real and inexplicable as they had been moments before. He reached for his reading glasses, studying the markings more closely, searching for any sign of fakery or deception. Under magnification, the markings became even more extraordinary. The edges were perfectly sealed, the depth absolutely uniform, the spacing mathematically precise. No human technology could create such perfect scarification, certainly not overnight and without the subject's knowledge. The colonel had seen classified weapons demonstrations, experimental surgical techniques, and cutting-edge manufacturing processes, but nothing that could explain what he was witnessing. Sarah's medical records, which she had brought with her, told an equally impossible story. CT scans and MRI images showed that the markings extended deeper than the surface skin, creating three-dimensional patterns within her tissue. Blood tests revealed trace elements that shouldn't exist in the human body, isotopes that didn't match any known terrestrial source. Every medical professional who had examined her had been baffled, unable to explain how such markings could appear without causing severe tissue damage or infection. The colonel's skepticism crumbled as he processed the implications. This wasn't mass hysteria or attention-seeking behavior. This was physical evidence of something unprecedented, something that demanded investigation regardless of how impossible it seemed. His training told him to follow evidence wherever it led, even when it led to conclusions that challenged everything he thought he knew. Sarah's eyes filled with tears of relief as she watched the change in Colonel Morrison's demeanor. For 3 months she had carried this burden alone, dismissed by everyone who might have been able to help her. Now finally, someone was taking her seriously. Someone with authority and resources was looking at her evidence with the analytical mind it deserved. The isolation that had nearly driven her to despair began to lift for the first time since that terrible morning when her life had changed forever. Colonel Morrison's hands trembled slightly as he reached for his secure phone, his 30 years of military composure finally cracking under the weight of what he had witnessed. The patterns on Sarah's arms had fundamentally shifted his understanding of what was possible, and his training demanded immediate action. He dialed a number known only to a handful of people in the Pentagon, a direct line to projects so classified that they existed without official names or budget allocations. The voice that answered belonged to Dr. Elena Vasquez, the head of a special investigations unit that dealt with phenomena that fell outside conventional military understanding. She had been Morrison's contact for unusual incidents over the past decade, though he had never called with anything remotely approaching this level of significance. Her background in both physics and military intelligence made her uniquely qualified to assess threats that challenged traditional scientific paradigms. Morrison's voice was steady but urgent as he described Sarah's markings in clinical detail. He used precise military terminology, describing measurements, patterns, and anomalies with the accuracy that had made him one of the Pentagon's most trusted field assessors. Dr. Vasquez listened without interruption, asking only for clarification on specific technical details that might provide clues about the technology involved. Within 2 hours, a specialized medical team arrived at Fort Henderson aboard an unmarked aircraft. The team included Dr. Michael Chen, a dermatologist with security clearance who specialized in unusual scarification patterns, and Dr. Sarah Williams, a physicist whose work on electromagnetic phenomena had contributed to several classified projects. They brought with them equipment that most hospitals could only dream of accessing, devices capable of analysis at the molecular level. Sarah found herself in a sterile medical facility beneath the base, submitting to tests that pushed the boundaries of current medical technology. High-resolution scanners mapped every millimeter of the markings, creating three-dimensional models that revealed their true complexity. The patterns weren't merely surface decorations but intricate networks that extended deep into her tissue, forming structures that resembled advanced circuitry more than biological scarring. Dr. Chen's initial examination revealed details that defied medical explanation. The scarring showed no signs of inflammation or immune response, suggesting that Sarah's body had somehow accepted the foreign elements without resistance. Tissue samples taken with Sarah's consent revealed crystalline structures embedded within her cells, structures that shouldn't be able to exist in living tissue without causing Massive cellular death. The physics team made equally disturbing discoveries. Dr. Williams detected electromagnetic emissions coming from the markings themselves, weak but consistent pulses that followed patterns too complex to be random. The frequency of these emissions fell outside normal human perception, but matched theoretical models for advanced communication systems. Whatever had created these markings had essentially turned Sarah into a living transmitter. As news of the discoveries spread through classified channels, Sarah found herself at the center of the most significant investigation of her lifetime. Scientists and military analysts from across the country began arriving at Fort Henderson, each bringing expertise that might help explain what had happened to her. The small conference room where she had first met Colonel Morrison was replaced by a sophisticated command center equipped with the latest analytical technology. Dr. Vasquez took personal charge of the investigation, recognizing that Sarah's case might represent first contact with technology beyond human understanding. The patterns on Sarah's arms were photographed, scanned, and analyzed by teams of experts working around the clock. Linguists studied the symbols for signs of communication, while mathematicians searched for hidden codes within the geometric structures. Sarah's hometown of Millbrook became the focus of intensive investigation. Military teams combed through the area where she claimed to have encountered the phenomenon, using ground-penetrating radar and electromagnetic sensors to search for any residual evidence. They found traces of unusual isotopes in the soil, electromagnetic anomalies that persisted months after the alleged incident, and reports from other residents who had experienced strange phenomena on the same night. The investigation expanded as more witnesses came forward. Mrs. Chen, Sarah's elderly neighbor, admitted to seeing strange lights on the night in question but had been too frightened to report them. A local rancher reported that his cattle had behaved strangely for weeks after the incident, refusing to graze in certain areas of his property. Electronic devices throughout the town had malfunctioned simultaneously, an event that local repair shops had attributed to solar flare activity. Colonel Morrison found himself coordinating with agencies he had never known existed, departments with bland names that concealed their true purpose. The investigation had become a matter of national security, with implications that reached far beyond Sarah's personal experience. If the markings represented genuine contact with non-human intelligence, the ramifications for human civilization were profound. Sarah watched the investigation unfold with a mixture of relief and growing concern. She was grateful that her story was finally being taken seriously, that the isolation and disbelief she had endured for months was coming to an end. However, she was also beginning to understand that her life would never return to normal. The markings had made her a person of interest to the most classified elements of the government, and that interest came with responsibilities she had never asked for. The medical team monitoring Sarah's condition made a discovery that elevated the investigation to crisis levels. The markings were changing, evolving in subtle ways that suggested they were more than mere scars. New patterns were beginning to appear, growing slowly but unmistakably from the original designs. Whatever process had created the markings was apparently ongoing, and Sarah was changing in ways that no one could predict or control. Dr. Vasquez called an emergency meeting of the investigation team as the implications became clear. Sarah wasn't just a witness to an extraordinary event. She was an active participant in something that was still happening. The markings weren't simply evidence of past contact, but an ongoing communication system that was still active. Sarah had become a bridge between humanity and something beyond human understanding, whether she wanted that role or not. Dr. Elena Vasquez stood before a wall of monitors in the underground command center, watching in real time as the patterns on Sarah's arms continued their slow evolution. The markings had grown noticeably over the past week, new geometric structures branching out from the original designs like living fractals. Each change was documented with precision that bordered on obsession, photographed every hour, and analyzed by teams of specialists working in shifts around the clock. Sarah lay on a specialized examination table, her arms connected to sensors that monitored every electromagnetic pulse, every subtle temperature variation, every microscopic change in the mysterious patterns. She had agreed to remain at the facility voluntarily, understanding that her transformation might hold keys to understanding something unprecedented in human history. The sterile environment had become her temporary home, complete with comfortable quarters and entertainment to help pass the long hours of observation. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Dr. James Liu, a young cryptographer recently assigned to the project, noticed that the electromagnetic pulses from Sarah's markings weren't random, but followed mathematical sequences. Working with barely any sleep for 3 consecutive days, he had mapped the pulse patterns and discovered they corresponded to prime numbers, then Fibonacci sequences, then increasingly complex mathematical concepts that suggested deliberate intelligence. The command center erupted in controlled excitement as Dr. Liu presented his findings. The patterns weren't just evidence of advanced technology. They were a message, a communication attempt using mathematics as a universal language. The realization that Sarah was carrying an active communication system transformed the entire nature of the investigation. She wasn't just a witness or victim, but humanity's first ambassador to an intelligence beyond Earth. Dr. Vasquez authorized the construction of a response system, a device capable of sending electromagnetic pulses that might allow two-way communication. The engineering team worked with unprecedented urgency, understanding that they might be crafting humanity's first conversation with non-human intelligence. Sarah watched the preparations with growing anxiety, aware that her role was about to become even more significant and potentially dangerous. The first attempt at communication took place in a shielded chamber designed to contain any unexpected electromagnetic effects. Sarah sat calmly as the response device sent carefully crafted mathematical sequences toward her arms, targeting the same frequencies that the markings were using to transmit. The immediate response was dramatic. The patterns began pulsing more rapidly, their luminescence increasing until they were clearly visible even under bright lights. New symbols began appearing on Sarah's skin with frightening speed, complex geometric forms that seemed to write themselves across her arms in real time. The medical team monitored her vital signs closely, ready to intervene if the process caused any distress. But Sarah reported no pain or discomfort. Instead, she described a strange sense of connection, as if something vast and patient was finally able to make itself understood. Dr. Liu worked frantically to decode the new patterns as they appeared, his computer algorithms struggling to keep pace with the rapid information flow. The mathematics involved were unlike anything in human knowledge, incorporating concepts that challenged fundamental assumptions about geometry and physics. The intelligence behind the message was demonstrating capabilities that suggested technology centuries ahead of human development. The content of the message, when finally decoded, left the entire team stunned. It wasn't a greeting or an introduction, but a warning. The intelligence was attempting to communicate information about an approaching threat, something that would affect not just Earth but multiple worlds throughout the galaxy. The mathematical models embedded in the patterns described astronomical events with precision that human science was only beginning to achieve. Sarah became the focal point of the most important conversation in human history, her arms serving as a communication interface between species. The intelligence behind the message demonstrated remarkable patience, repeating key concepts when the human team struggled to understand, simplifying complex ideas when the mathematics proved too advanced. It was clear that this entity had experience communicating with developing civilizations. The warning became clearer as more information flowed through Sarah's transformed physiology. A massive stellar event was approaching, something that would affect multiple star systems in ways that could devastate planets harboring life. The intelligence providing the warning had apparently encountered this phenomenon before, and was attempting to share survival strategies with younger civilizations like humanity. Colonel Morrison found himself reporting directly to the highest levels of government as the implications became clear. This wasn't just a scientific curiosity, but a potential threat to human survival that required immediate action. The intelligence communicating through Sarah was offering assistance, but accepting that help would mean acknowledging that humanity was part of a larger galactic community with responsibilities beyond Earth. Sarah experienced the weight of her role as she realized that decisions affecting all of humanity might depend on information flowing through her body. The markings had made her more than human in some ways, a hybrid entity capable of bridging the gap between species with completely different evolutionary paths. She found herself thinking in concepts that had no human words, understanding mathematics that her conscious mind couldn't grasp. The intelligence began sharing technology through the markings, embedding blueprints for devices that could protect Earth from the approaching stellar event. The designs required materials and manufacturing techniques beyond current human capabilities, but they provided a roadmap for rapid technological advancement. Sarah became a living library of advanced knowledge, carrying information that could transform human civilization. Dr. Vasquez realized that the investigation had evolved far beyond its original scope. They were no longer studying an anomaly, but managing first contact with a benevolent intelligence that was offering to help humanity survive a cosmic threat. The decisions made in the coming days would determine not just Sarah's future, but the future of the entire human species. The message was becoming increasingly urgent, with the markings pulsing more rapidly, and new information appearing faster than the team could process it. Time was running out for preparation, and the intelligence was doing everything possible to ensure that humanity had the knowledge needed to survive what was coming. Sarah found herself at the center of the most important moment in human history, carrying the hopes and fears of an entire species in the patterns written across her skin. The President's Emergency Council convened in the Situation Room beneath the White House, their faces grim as Dr. Vasquez presented the intelligence gathered from Sarah's ongoing transformation. World leaders participated via secure video links, each grappling with the reality that their response to this unprecedented situation would determine the survival of human civilization. The markings on Sarah's arms had revealed a timeline that left little room for debate or delay. According to the calculations embedded in the alien communication, the stellar event would reach Earth's solar system in less than 18 months. The phenomenon involved the collapse of a massive star system, approximately 40 light-years away, creating a cascade of radiation and gravitational disturbances that would affect hundreds of worlds. The intelligence communicating through Sarah had witnessed this destruction before and was desperately trying to save as many civilizations as possible. Sarah found herself transported to the White House under extraordinary security measures, her role as humanity's primary communication link with the alien intelligence making her one of the most important people on Earth. She sat in rooms where presidents had made decisions affecting millions of lives, now serving as the conduit for information that could affect billions. The weight of responsibility was almost unbearable, but she understood that no one else could perform this crucial function. The alien intelligence had provided detailed blueprints for protective technology, devices that could create electromagnetic shields around entire planets. However, the construction requirements were staggering, demanding resources and cooperation on a scale that humanity had never achieved. The technology required rare earth elements in quantities that would exhaust known global reserves, manufacturing processes that would require retooling entire industries, and international cooperation that seemed impossible given current political tensions. Government scientists worked around the clock to verify the alien calculations, using the most powerful computers available to model the approaching stellar collapse. Every simulation confirmed the devastating scope of the threat. Without protection, the radiation burst would strip away Earth's ozone layer, boil the oceans, and render the planet uninhabitable for any complex life forms. The alien intelligence wasn't offering help out of altruism. It was providing humanity with the only possible path to survival. The markings on Sarah's arms had evolved into a complex network that covered her shoulders and was beginning to spread across her back. Medical teams monitored her transformation carefully, ensuring that the changes weren't causing cellular damage or threatening her health. Remarkably, her body seemed to be adapting to accommodate the alien technology, strengthening to handle the increasing flow of information and energy. Political leaders struggled with the implications of accepting alien assistance. Some argued that humanity should rely on its own technology and resourcefulness, refusing to become dependent on an alien civilization regardless of the consequences. Others recognized that pride was a luxury that humanity could no longer afford, that survival required acknowledging the limitations of human knowledge and accepting help from a superior intelligence. Sarah experienced the debate through her unique connection to the alien intelligence, feeling its frustration at human reluctance to accept assistance. The entity had encountered this resistance before with other young civilizations, watching helplessly as pride and fear prevented species from taking necessary steps to ensure their survival. Time was running out for productive cooperation, and the intelligence was beginning to consider more direct intervention methods. The breakthrough in human consensus came when observatories around the world detected the first signs of the stellar collapse, confirming the alien predictions with terrifying accuracy. The distant star was beginning to show instabilities that matched the mathematical models provided through Sarah's markings. Skeptics who had dismissed the alien warnings as elaborate hoaxes suddenly found themselves confronting undeniable evidence of the approaching threat. Construction of the protective devices began simultaneously in multiple countries, with nations that had been enemies for generations suddenly cooperating with unprecedented efficiency. The alien technology required precision that pushed human manufacturing capabilities to their limits, but the designs were specifically crafted to work within the constraints of current human technology. The intelligence had apparently studied human civilization carefully before offering assistance. Sarah's transformation accelerated as the construction projects began, her body becoming a real-time monitoring system that tracked progress across the globe. She could sense the installation of components in facilities she had never seen, feel the electromagnetic signatures of devices being brought online thousands of miles away. The alien intelligence was using her enhanced physiology to coordinate the global construction effort with precision no human communication system could achieve. The markings revealed additional information as human commitment to the project became clear. The intelligence belonged to a coalition of civilizations that had survived similar stellar events, a galactic community dedicated to preserving life wherever it emerged. Earth's successful protection would make humanity eligible for membership in this alliance, opening possibilities for technological and cultural exchange that could transform human civilization forever. Opposition to the project continued from various groups who viewed the alien assistance as a threat to human independence and identity. Terrorist attacks targeted construction facilities, while political movements demanded that humanity face the stellar event without alien intervention. Sarah became a target for these groups, seen as a traitor who had sold humanity's sovereignty to alien masters. The intelligence conveyed through Sarah's markings that time for preparation was running shorter than originally calculated. New data from the collapsing star system showed that the cascade event was accelerating, reducing the timeline for protective measures by several months. The construction projects would need to operate at maximum efficiency, with no margin for error or delay. Sarah realized that her transformation was irreversible, that she had become something between human and alien, that could never return to her former life. The markings now covered most of her upper body, creating patterns of such complexity that even the most advanced computers struggled to map their full structure. She had become humanity's permanent ambassador to the galactic community, whether she had chosen that role or not. The global construction effort reached a critical phase as the first protective devices came online, creating electromagnetic fields that could be detected from orbit. The alien intelligence expressed satisfaction through Sarah's enhanced senses, confirming that humanity was making adequate progress toward survival. However, the final test would come when the stellar collapse reached its peak and sent its devastating wave of destruction racing across the galaxy toward Earth. 18 months after Sarah first rolled up her sleeves in Colonel Morrison's office, she stood in the Global Command Center watching as humanity prepared for the most crucial test in its history. The markings now covered her entire torso and arms, creating patterns so intricate that they seemed to pulse with their own intelligence. She had become more than human, a bridge between worlds whose transformation had made possible the salvation of her species. The stellar collapse had accelerated beyond all predictions, and the wave of destruction was now racing toward Earth at unprecedented speed. Observatories around the world tracked its progress as it consumed planetary systems in its path, sterilizing worlds that had harbored life for millions of years. The electromagnetic pulse preceding the main event was already affecting communication satellites and causing aurora displays visible even in daylight. Every protective device that humanity had constructed was now online, creating a network of electromagnetic shields that surrounded the planet like an invisible shell. The technology worked exactly as the alien intelligence had promised, generating fields that could deflect radiation and stabilize gravitational disturbances. However, the true test would come when the full force of the stellar collapse reached Earth's solar system. Sarah felt the approaching wave through her enhanced senses, experiencing the cosmic event as both a human observer and an alien communication system. The intelligence that had saved her species was present in her consciousness, sharing the experience of watching another young civilization attempt to survive its first major cosmic trial. She understood now that this was a rite of passage, a test that determined which species would join the galactic community and which would become extinct. The wave front reached the outer planets first, its effects visible through powerful telescopes as it interacted with their magnetic fields. Jupiter's great red spot intensified dramatically, while Saturn's rings began emitting unusual electromagnetic signatures. The protective devices responded automatically, their alien technology adapting to conditions that no human engineer could have anticipated. Sarah served as the central processing unit for the entire network, her transformed physiology coordinating responses across the globe. Ground-based sensors detected the arrival of the electromagnetic pulse 6 hours before the main wave, confirming that the protective network was functioning correctly. Power grids around the world experienced fluctuations as the alien technology drew massive amounts of energy to maintain the shields, but backup systems that had been prepared specifically for this moment kept essential services running. Humanity held its breath as the moment of truth approached. The main wave struck Earth with force that dwarfed the most powerful nuclear weapons ever created, but the protective shields held firm. The planet's electromagnetic field flickered and distorted under the assault, creating spectacular light displays that were visible from space. But the essential barrier remained intact. Sarah felt the strain through every fiber of her being as the alien technology channeled energies that could have destroyed continents. For 72 hours, the wave continued its assault on Earth's defenses, testing every component of the protective network with relentless intensity. Some devices failed under the extreme conditions, their human-built components unable to withstand forces they were never designed to handle. However, the alien intelligence had anticipated such failures, building redundancy into the network that allowed it to compensate for damaged units. Sarah's role became critical during the peak of the assault, as she served as a living repair system for the protective network. Her enhanced physiology allowed her to reroute power, recalibrate failed devices, and coordinate emergency responses faster than any computer system could manage. She experienced the battle for humanity's survival as a personal struggle, feeling every hit the shields absorbed and every successful deflection of deadly radiation. The alien intelligence revealed through Sarah's consciousness that humanity's performance during the crisis was exceptional. Most young civilizations lost significant portions of their population during their first major stellar event. But Earth's casualties were minimal, thanks to the unprecedented global cooperation that had made the protective network possible. Humanity had proven itself worthy of membership in the galactic community. As the wave finally passed and Earth's shields began to power down, Sarah felt a profound sense of accomplishment mixed with exhaustion. Her transformation had cost her a normal human life, but it had enabled her species to survive its greatest test. The markings on her skin began to fade slightly, their emergency functions no longer needed, but the basic communication network remained active for future contact with the Galactic Alliance. The aftermath of the stellar event brought changes that transformed human civilization. Technologies shared through Sarah's communication link revolutionized everything from energy production to space travel, allowing humanity to begin exploring other star systems within decades rather than centuries. The planet that had once seemed isolated in the cosmos was revealed to be part of a vast community of intelligent species. Sarah accepted her new role as Earth's permanent ambassador to the Galactic Alliance, understanding that her transformation had made her uniquely qualified for interspecies communication. She established the first human embassy for galactic affairs, working to integrate humanity into a community of civilizations that spanned thousands of star systems. Her sacrifice had become the foundation for humanity's future among the stars. Colonel Morrison, now promoted to General and Director of the new Department of Galactic Affairs, often reflected on that day when Sarah had first rolled up her sleeves in his office. His initial skepticism seemed almost quaint in retrospect, a reminder of how much humanity had learned about its place in the universe. Sarah's courage in revealing her markings had quite literally saved the world, proving that sometimes the most unbelievable stories are the most important ones to believe. The small town of Millbrook, Arizona, became a pilgrimage site for those seeking to understand humanity's first contact with alien intelligence. A monument was erected at the location where Sarah had first encountered the phenomenon that changed her life, honoring her sacrifice and celebrating humanity's survival. Her story became required reading in schools around the world, teaching future generations about the importance of courage, truth, and the willingness to believe in possibilities beyond conventional understanding. Sarah often stood at her office window in the Galactic Embassy, watching ships from other worlds arrive at the space station that now orbited Earth. Her reflection in the glass showed the faint traces of markings that had once covered her skin, reminders of the night when her life changed forever. She had become more than human, but in doing so, she had helped humanity become more than it had ever dreamed possible. The galaxy was vast and filled with wonders that humanity was only beginning to explore, but Earth was no longer alone in the darkness. Sarah's willingness to reveal her truth, despite the skepticism and disbelief she faced, had opened the door to a future where human children would grow up knowing they were part of something magnificent and eternal. Her courage had not only saved her world, but had given her species a place among the stars, where new adventures and discoveries awaited those brave enough to reach for them. In the quiet moments between diplomatic meetings and interstellar communications, Sarah sometimes remembered that terrified librarian who had driven across 3 states just to find someone who would listen to her impossible story. That woman seemed like a stranger now, but Sarah honored her memory by never forgetting how it felt to carry the truth alone. She made sure that in humanity's new galactic age, no one would ever again face such a burden without support, understanding, and most importantly, belief in the extraordinary possibilities that lay hidden within the ordinary moments of life.